Hey guys, welcome back to the Joy of Wrenching. I'm your friendly neighborhood mechanic, and today in the shop we've got this 2006 Honda Pilot, and it has a problem with the ball joints, which are part of the lower control arm on this vehicle. So here's your ball joint here, and the ones that are on this truck are wobbly and causing it to make all kind of noise and wander all over the road. So you can replace just the ball joint, or in the case of this thing, come over here and take a look, the bushings as well are worn out. So we're choosing to replace the whole lower control arm, which comes with ball joint and new bushings. And while we're at it, it also has worn out tie rod ends, so we're going to replace those, and sway bar end links. So 3 big things to do. Going to really tighten up the front end of this thing, and so I want you guys to come along and see just how easy this can be with the right tools. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the process, the quickest and easiest way that I know how. And with the right tools, which I've got most of them laid out right here, so take a look. They're just normal basic hand tools. Come take a look at what we've got on the table here. So just, you know, normal wrenches, a few hammers, some different types of pliers, maybe a drift or something like that, and a good impact. That's going to come in really handy for this job. So with just a few normal hand tools, we can do this job, put a new lower control arm in place without taking all of this apart. So we're going to leave the brakes on here, we're going to leave the CV axle attached, and we're going to go ahead and show you how to take all this stuff apart the quick and easy way. So let me show you how this lower control arm is held in place. So on these vehicles, the lower control arm is held in place in 3 points. You've got one bolt back here, you've got another bolt right in here that holds this part, and then the ball joint comes in right through here in the bottom of the knuckle. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it apart from these 3 points. We're going to swing this out of the way, and we're going to slide out the old lower control arm, put the new one in, bolt it back in place, tighten everything back up. I'll show you just how easy that can be. Come over here, I want to show you the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start to loosen this lower control arm ball joint up where it connects to the knuckle. And as you can see, it's held on by this clip right here. Let's come look at it from above. In order to get that clip off, we just got to pinch it over here and pull it. Oh, goodness. Pull it out of its little locking area and then slide it out. I'm going to set that aside. Now we can get in here and try to loosen this nut up. Now this thing is going to be on here really, really tight. And so I'm going to do this double wrench method here to try and loosen this thing up. And that's a 19 millimeter. Man, that took a lot of force to get that loosened up. But now that it's loosened up, we can go ahead and get this sucker all the way loosened off. So now that we've broke this one loose, we can go ahead and switch over to a ratcheting wrench. That just makes things a little easier. Go ahead and back this off. There we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and leave that on there. And what we're going to do is we're going to hit this with a hammer really hard to shock this whole connection right in here, because these two are almost welded together in a way. See how there's so much corrosion down in there? So I'm going to spray a little penetrating lube in there, and then we're going to whack this sucker really good with a hammer here to see if we can break that loose. Put a little bit of PV blaster down in there, and I'm going to get one of these hammers. So the kind of hammer you want to use is something that's, you know, got some mass to it, but it's not unwieldy. You can still swing it and be pretty sure you're going to hit where you mean to hit. One reason why I like to leave these nuts on here is it's not like this is going to just fall out of the way, but if I miss and accidentally hit here, then I could booger up those threads. I'm not reusing this, but it's just sort of a convention I have, and I don't want to miss and hit this backing plate or hit this or hit the CV axle. So I'm going to try and hit it just right here, and we're going to see if we can get this thing to loosen up. Are you ready? Here we go. Now, again, that's not going to fall out, so let's see if we got it to loosen up. I'm going to get a crowbar here, pry bar of some kind, and what we're going to try and do, we're going to stick it in this thing and see if it'll move. It is not moving yet, so that is not loose. We're going to have to try some more. Ready? Give it a good whack right here. All right, let's see if that worked. Oh, not yet. This one is held in there really good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the wheel and I'm going to come and whack on the other end. Okay, so we beat on that side of the knuckle and tried to loosen it up. Now we're going to beat on this side of the knuckle and see if it does any better. Again, we're trying to hit it right there. Good shock into it. Okay. Let's see if we loosened it up yet. There it is. You see that, guys? Look at there. We got her loosened up. Now, you could also use a ball joint separator that will push on this stud here at the top and push it through. But I'm just showing you the quicker and easier way to do things. Now that our ball joint is disconnected here, we're going to go ahead and move to the other two connecting points. We've got this one through bolt here that's 19 millimeter, and then down here, coming up from below, is also a 19 millimeter. So we'll just spin these out. This is where a really good impact comes in handy. All right, let's go ahead and get this last bolt. There's that one. And then this guy is undone. Go ahead and spin it all the way out. There's that one. Okay, so now this lower control arm is completely detached from here and in the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it down so that we can get it out of the knuckle. Just like that. Once it's free of the knuckle, then it'll easily, or more easily, slip out of a connection here inside the frame, just like that. There we go. So here's the old, out with the old, and we'll go back in with the new. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put the new one back into the place where the old one came out, and we're going to start just by sliding these connections in where they were. So you can start with this one back in the back here, just like I showed you. It slides right into this pocket just like that. And if it's a tight fit, you can kind of whack on it with a hammer, or you can bend that back to shape a little bit. And then you can get your bolt that came out of there and start it in through the hole and just start it up into place. Now, don't forget to put some Loctite, see that blue Loctite, on these bolts for the suspension so that they can't back out. So come under here and take a look up in there. You want to line that up to where you see the hole, like that. Then you can get her to go up into place and just get it started a couple threads. You can use your hand, or what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get that impact back out We're just going to get it started into place. And you'll know it's in place when it starts to thread in. Just like that, okay? Now, we can swing the control arm around just like this and put the other side into its pocket. And we're going to have to get this thing out of our way just a little bit in order to do that. And it may be easier for us to take the tie rod off of it so that we get just a little bit more play, a little bit more movement out of it. And so let's see if we can just push this up in there without moving that. Yeah, probably will be all right. Probably can, but we'll see. There goes that. And this side here. There we go. All right. There we go. Now, it's not quite seated all the way in. What we can do in order to help it go the rest of the way is get us a little hammer. Just kind of tap it back into place, just like that. Did I go too far there? A little bit too far. You see how we went a little bit too far? Well, this is where a drift or a screwdriver or something like that comes in handy. You pull it back, hit it back a little bit with your hammer if you have to. You get that drift or something in here, and you can line up that hole so that when you're trying to put your bolt in there, it'll line up. Let me show you that. Come in from this side. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just cheat. I'm going to use my pry bar a little bit here. I'm going to put my pry bar inside this place. That way I can line up the bolt hole. Again, just enough to get her started there. Go, tighten this up a little bit. Just like that. All right, those two are connected. Now we don't want to tighten those things up quite yet because we need to set this at ride height. Now, ride height is where this lower control arm is kind of almost level with the bottom of the car, because once you put weight on it, all of this sinks back up because of the weight of the vehicle. There's a couple of different ways we can do that. We can put a jack under here and compress all of this once we get this all connected, or we can put this control arm at an angle like this, straight out, and then tighten it. That way it's just in the place where it needs to be. So in order to make all of this a little bit easier to take apart and also to put back together, you can take off this tie rod end. And again, we're replacing these, so we can do that anyway. The first thing we need to do in order to get that tie rod end off of there is to remove this cotter pin which holds it in place. So just straighten this thing out or cut it off, whichever you prefer. I'm going to straighten it out, and then you can tap it back through a little bit. If that's not working too good, you can grab it on the other side. Try to pull it, kind of wedge it out, grab it, give it a little bit of a wedge as you grab it, pull it through, just like this. There we go. This too is a 19 millimeter. We're gonna go ahead and release that. Again, you can take it all the way off, or you can leave it on just a little bit. And I'm gonna leave it on just a little bit. I've got it just about flush here. Let me tighten it up just a hair. That way it's kind of flush with the bottom of the bolt or stud there. That way, if I want to, I can strike that with a hammer, but I'm gonna strike here just as we did down on the knuckle to get this out. We're gonna strike here to loosen it and get that out. Are you ready? We're gonna strike this knuckle here so that we can release the bond that's got on that tie rod end. So a couple of strikes right here ought to get her loosened up. Let's see. Not yet. Not yet. There it is. All right, now that we've popped that thing loose, we'll go ahead and remove this nut all the way. And this comes right out. You can see how floppy and easy to move these things are. All right, I'll set this out of the way just for now. it's wanting to just go wherever it wants to go. Okay, but now this thing's a little bit easier to maneuver. So we can put our lower ball joint into its home. I'm taking the nut off of here and this protective cap, which is just there to protect the rubber there. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull this down, push our knuckle this direction, and until ball joint wants to go up in there. Let's get those to line up. There we go. Okay, now we can take our new nut that came with our ball joint here and spin it down. And we'll tighten this up. So now we've got our lower ball joint back into the knuckle. We've got our new nut on top of it. Now the new nut is a 22 millimeter. The one that came off of there was a 19. And I'm gonna just get that tight. The torque spec on this, I think, is about 50 foot-pounds plus 60 degrees. So we're just gonna get her tight and then give her a good 60-degree turn until we line up, come look real close, until we can line up one of these castle cutouts with that hole where the cotter pin's gonna pass through. So a little bit more. Get this turn just a little bit more. A little bit more. About to pull the car down. There we go. All right. Now that that's lined up, we can take our new cotter pin, slide it in to the hole, like so, and then we need to bend this end here up so that it can't come out. Just grab the longer of the two there and bend it over, and cut it off if you want. I don't usually do that because it doesn't bother me that they're there, and that's not going anywhere. Our ball joint connection is tight, but our connections to the frame here, this bolt in the front part of the control arm and this bolt from underneath that goes up through, those can't be tightened until this is at ride height. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this jack underneath here. You can use a floor jack if you're on the ground, and we're gonna raise up this control arm until the suspension is compressed. So you'll see this control arm start to go up like that as we tighten this up. See how that's coming up like that. We want to go until it's about where the wheel would be when it's on the ground, which in general is going to be, you know, more or less parallel or almost parallel the lower part of this control arm. Now, because I've got this thing on the lift here, at some point I'll be taking so much of the weight of the vehicle that it might try to lift it off of the pad here where it's being held in the pinch well. So we don't want it to go that far. The other thing we got to be careful with is that this doesn't slip out of place because it's not really attached to anything and comes springing back down. That's probably about good enough. So we're going to go ahead and tighten these things up now. Okay, so our suspension now is under compression, so it's at ride height. And we're going to go ahead and snug up these bolts that hold the control arms in place. Remember, we put Loctite on these so that they don't come backing out. There we go. Torque setting on these, 70 foot-pounds. So let's go ahead and torque these boogers. There we go, 70 and 70, good. All right, so that's it. Torqued 70 foot-pounds, torqued to 70 foot-pounds, and torqued to 50 foot-pounds plus 60 degrees. Got the cotter pin on it. All three connections of that lower control arm are in place. See, really, with the right tools, you know, you don't have to have a lift though. I mean, just the right hand tools, this thing isn't so bad to do this job. And again, we didn't take off the brakes, we didn't loosen the CV axle or any of that. Really, I didn't even undo the tie rod end until later. And you don't have to do that. It just makes it a little easier to maneuver this whole knuckle with everything attached to it. So now that we've got that, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to replacing that tie rod end and replacing that sway bar end link. And if you're interested in that, let's go. So now I'm going to show you how to remove these tie rod ends and replace those. So the tie rod ends are held in with a nut on this stud, and that nut usually has a keeper cutter pin. So you just straighten that cutter pin out and use your side cutters or needle nose or whatever and pull it out of the way. In this case, this nut is a 19 millimeter, so we're going to go ahead and get that off here, like so. And then you'll need to release the grip. There's a grip, this is a wedge-shaped pin or stud that comes down into the knuckle. In order to release that mechanical grip they have on each other, because this nut was pulling that tight, and there's also a little bit of corrosion in there, you'll take a hammer and strike it right here on this knuckle a couple of times, and that will release this thing. See that wedge right there? That was down inside of there, and it'll hold on for dear life sometimes. And so that's how you get that loose. I'm gonna go ahead and set that back in place for a second, because we're gonna have to come over here. In order to take this off, we need to loosen up this nut right here, this retaining nut, okay? And so you'll take a whatever size wrench, in this case, I think that is a, let's see, what size is that, 19 maybe? Yeah, 19 on this Honda Pilot. This is a 19, and you just want to break it loose, okay? Just enough. See how it's tight against the tie rod end? You just want to break it loose. And the reason for that is you want it to allow this tie rod end to come off. So we'll take it out. Now come over here and watch from this side. And what we've got to do is we've got to count how many times we rotate this to get it off. So you might need to hold the inner tie rod end to keep it from rotating, but we got 1 rotation, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 rotations, okay? So it took 18 rotations to get the old one off. And so compare it to your new one, and it should take the same amount of rotations to put the new one in place. That's the other reason why we just loosen this retaining nut right here, is once this bottoms out against it, it ought to be the same amount of distance or rotations in. And so we're just going to screw this on, and we'll count how many screws it takes, how many licks does it take to get to the center of the Tootsie Roll Pop. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. See, it came to a stop. Now it's up against that thing at 18. So everything's hunky dory. All right, so we screwed the new one in. It took the same number of turns, 18 turns to go back on as it did to come off. And so now all you've got to do is line up the hole here in your knuckle with the stud of the new tie rod end. So just rotate that thing till it lines up. There we go. Make sure that it goes down into that wedge. Make sure that that wedge of the new thing is down inside, and then you can spin on your new nut. Now the new nut doesn't have the castle. It doesn't take a cotter pin. This one's got nylon on the inside, and so it will hold on for dear life once it's tightened up. So you just tighten this thing up to the torque spec, and I'll link that torque spec here. I think it's like 40 something foot-pounds or something, maybe 50 foot-pounds, somewhere in there. But once that's tight, this thing will hold itself in place. Okay, so the new one here comes with a new nut, and that one is a 22. So we're just gonna secure this nut. All right, and then this gets torqued to 44 foot-pounds. So we'll set our torque wrench to 44 foot-pounds and give it a click or two. Let's see. All right. Well, really not that much. There you go. Next thing we need to do is tighten our retaining nut back here one more time. Remember, that was a 19 millimeter. So you just come in here and you want to tighten that nut up. That keeps this from changing length on us. There we go. And just make sure that your tie rod end here isn't cocked over too much. I want to make sure that this is more or less straight up and down, and it is. And so that is tie rod end job done. Okay, so we just showed you how to do the lower control arm, tie rod end, and now it's time for the last worn out piece of this suspension, which is this sway bar end link, which connects our sway bar to the strut here. And so in order to get this old one off of here, we're gonna have to remove this nut. Now notice that that nut is on a stud, which has a hex feature on the stud. That's a size 6 hex. And you may need to hold this stud, and I'll show you as we try to loosen that nut, this whole thing will try to spin. And so you may need to either hold the center section while turning the nut, or what I'll show you, and I think it's a little easier, is I'll come around the back side here and we'll hold this side with some locking pliers, and then we'll spin the nut off. So let's get to it. Let's see if this nut will just come right off. So this is a 17 on this car. We'll set that on there, and we'll. So it's just spinning. So it loosened it, but it's just spinning. And let me show you what's happening as I'm trying to turn this nut back here. The whole kit and caboodle, the whole doggone stud and everything is turning. And so what we need to do is we need to hold that stud. We'll go ahead and put a little penetrating lube on here, hopefully make this thing come apart a little easier. What I like to do is get back behind here and get some locking pliers on the back side. Lock that in place, nice and tight. There we go. All right, now let's see if we can loosen that thing up. Locking pliers came undone. And give another grip, but it is working. See, we've got it spinning off now. We'll come back here again, just lock into place. Not tight enough. Make sure it's good and tight. Good and tight. A little bit more. There we go. Well, I turned over my vice grips here because it was wearing out the teeth on the vice grips trying to hold it. That's how rusted this thing is. So other options are you can try and put your hex in here and hold that in place while you spin that nut, which this is so rusty, there's no way that's going to happen. Or you can come back in here with a cutoff wheel or a sawzall and just cut that sucker through. We may end up having to go there, but I've got another bite on the back side here, and let's see if it'll just spin off for us. Woo! It worked, but man, look how hot. Look at the steam coming off of that. It got that hot just trying to come off of there. That was for sure very, very difficult to get off. That's probably not going to happen. Yeah, look at that. It's like a smoking gun. That is probably not going to happen with a regular wrench. Whew, that was a tough one. So the upper nut on this sway bar end link was holding on for dear life. So I put a little penetrating lube on this lower one. And because of its location, you really can't get the impact back there. So I'm gonna have to do it the old fashioned way. So this is a size 17 wrench. We're gonna stick it over there. And because it's gonna be difficult, I'm gonna double up on my wrench here. And we're going to break this thing loose. I've got the vice grips here holding it in place. And it turned just a little bit. Let's see if we can keep it turning. There we go. Got a couple of turns out of it, so good news so far. And the stud is staying in place because of the vice grips. Hopefully you guys can see this method. Seems to be working pretty good. Let me see here. Yeah, let me get the ratcheting wrench because it feels like it's just about loose enough that it might actually just come off with the ratcheting wrench. That would be amazing, wouldn't it? So we got our 17 ratcheting wrench here. And we'll just turn that nut as long as it will allow us to do so. So far, so good, huh, guys? Whew. This one's coming off a lot easier. I think we got lucky on this one. I tell you, the other side came off like a breeze. Of course, you go to film it and show people how easy it is. Oh, yeah. Now it's going to fight you. But, you know, it's good to see what you have to go through and what methods there are when you kind of run into a roadblock with the first one you start. And there almost always is another way. And at the end of the day, you can always use the cutoff wheel, sawzall, or even worse, the smoke wrench, and get these things apart. Because again, we're not even reusing these things. So now that nut's off of there, we can finally get our sway bar end link out of place and go back in with our new one. Man, that was a workout trying to get that old stabilizer end link off, but we did finally get it out of the way. And so we're going to go in with this new one. Now the new one comes with new hardware, and in this case it's a 19 millimeter nut. And then also to hold this stud from spinning around, we could use that hex feature again, or on the back side, it's got some nice flats on this piece right here, and you can hold that with a size 16 wrench. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and choose to do it that way, just because it's usually easier in that way than trying to get that hex feature inside of the center. So to put this thing up in place, it's just like it came out. Just remember, if your studs were going towards the car, put them towards the car. If they're coming out away from the car, put them out away from the car. So we'll go ahead and show you. Just get that thing right there. Oops, we got another. I dropped one nut, but I got another. So we'll put that right there. And then we'll come back down here. We'll come around this side and take a look where we've got this thing stabbed into the sway bar. And we'll go ahead and get the nut started there. All right, so we're going to do the easy one first. So as I mentioned, there's a little flat on the back side of this thing that I can get a 16 millimeter wrench on, and then this is the front is a 19 millimeter. So let me get that 19 millimeter. And we're just going to use our impact to suck this thing down. There we go. Got the wrench on there. There it is. That's tight. And of course this has a nylon nut, so it can't back off. Now we can't get this impact back behind here to tighten the other one, so we're going to have to do that one with a wrench. Okay, so we'll get our 19 millimeter wrench here, and I'm going to use a ratcheting wrench just because it's so much easier. And we'll go ahead and start tightening it. And as you see, while we're tightening it, at some point back here, that stud's going to start turning. You see that flat spot turning around? That means that we need to give it a little bit of a hold here, and that's a 16 mil to hold that backside. That way, everything can come back together. So we'll tighten this up. They give you like a 4-foot long stud there, don't they? Takes a little while with a wrench. Can you imagine how much longer it would take with a regular wrench? You have to move it, grab it, move it, grab it. That's why I love these ratcheting wrenches. And you could probably even get in here with a sort of a stubby sort of socket and ratchet. There we go. Get that good and tight. All right. Now the torque spec on the sway bar end links is I don't have that. It's just tight. That's what it is. Just get it tight. So there you go. So I just showed you how to replace the lower control arm, outer tie rod end, and sway bar end link on a 06, in this case, Honda Pilot or similar vehicle. Not too shabby. I mean, sometimes if there's a little corrosion or whatever, it may fight you, but with just simple hand tools, you can do this. And, you know, this is something that's going to make a world of difference in how this vehicle tracks, how it stays on the road, and how secure you feel driving it. So this is a really important upgrade if your car is kind of has problems with alignment, or you feel it kind of got a lot of play in the suspension and steering. Check these things out, and as you can see, get these parts. You know, I get these typically from Rock Auto. Unfortunately, not a sponsor, but you know, you can get them online. You can get them at your local auto parts store, and as you can see, you can do this. You don't have to have a lift, nothing fancy. Just do this, and you'll make your car ride so much better. Thank you guys for tuning in today. I hope y'all have a wonderful week, and God bless.